They say southern nights are warm. That night, I froze. There were about 40 people in the backyard faces I recognized from church, old neighbors from our cul-de-sac, a few second cousins I hadn't seen since Grandma's funeral. String lights hung like stars between the oak trees, dipping low over folding tables covered in gingham cloth and Tupperware salads. Someone was playing soft country music through a Bluetooth speaker. People were laughing politely, passing around paper plates like we were the perfect family from a Sunday insert. I stood near the drink table holding a glass of sweet tea I hadn't touched. The ice had melted. My smile had too. I should have known something was coming. My father had been pacing the edge of the patio all evening like he was waiting for a commercial break in his own life. My mother kept smoothing down her blouse, pretending she wasn't watching him do it. And Mason, well, Mason had that smirk, the one he wore in high school when he'd crashed Mom's car and still got to keep his allowance. Then, like a thunderclap through summer humidity, it happened. "Claire," my father barked loud enough to cut through the music. "It's time you sell that house." The backyard went silent. Not polite silent. Not prayer before dinner silent. Stunned. He kept going, his voice sharp, a little too proud. "Your brother's loan isn't going to pay itself." My fingers tightened around the glass. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I looked to my mother. She didn't flinch, didn't even blink. She just stood there, arms folded, eyes somewhere between bored and complicit, like she'd already written this moment in her head weeks ago. Mason didn't look at me. He was too busy checking his phone, or pretending to. I waited. Maybe he'd laugh and say it was a joke. Maybe someone would step in, Aunt Julie, who always liked me best, but no one moved. No one spoke. They wanted to see if I'd crack, if I'd nod and smile like I always did, if I'd give in, again for the sake of peace. But something in me, something quiet and buried, started to rise. I placed the glass gently on the table. My voice was calm, almost gentle. "Then you'd better start packing." My father blinked. "What?" I looked at him, at both of them. My smile didn't reach my eyes. "You've got 30 days. The air changed, like someone had opened the wrong door and let winter in. A few murmurs began around the yard, questions whispered behind hands. I didn't answer them. I didn't need to, because they didn't know the truth. Not yet, and that was the best part. They said they didn't worry about me. They meant they didn't look for me. I learned early that in our house, fairness was a flexible thing. Mason was the baby, the only boy, the golden child with the dimpled grin and the boundless second chances. When he failed a test, it was the teacher's fault. When I got an A-, Mom asked if I'd studied enough. When he snuck out and crashed his car, sophomore year, Dad said, at least he came home. When I came home 15 minutes late from debate team, I was disrespectful. At 15, I was cooking dinner while Mason played Xbox in the living room. He had favorite meals. I had expectations. When I turned 17, I skipped prom so we could afford my SAT tutoring. Mason got a custom tuxedo for homecoming the same year, even though he dropped out halfway through the semester. And when I got into the University of Georgia on a full academic scholarship, they didn't come to orientation. Mom said gas was expensive that month. But when Mason dropped out of his third college, some tiny entrepreneurial institute in Florida, Dad drove down to help him move back. No one said, "We're proud of you." They said, "You've always figured it out, Claire. You're the stable one." But what they meant was, "You're not the one we lose sleep over, so we don't show up." I didn't throw tantrums. I didn't drink or skip class. I graduated early, got hired 6 weeks out of school, and never asked for help. I kept things moving on time. Under budget, emotionally efficient, I learned to send flowers for Mother's Day. I learned not to expect a card back. When Mason's first business failed a crypto podcast that never made it past episode 3, I helped pay off one of his credit cards, quietly. He never said thank you, just texted, "Got it, you're the best." When Dad had his first back surgery, I took off work, drove them to every appointment, coordinated insurance. At the follow-up, the nurse asked if I was his daughter. He said, "No, this is Claire," as if that clarified things. As if being Claire meant something separate from being his child. But I still hoped, still thought maybe, someday they'd see what I'd built. That quiet doesn't mean cold. That self-sufficiency doesn't mean I don't bleed. So when I bought my house red brick colonial wraparound porch, creaky stairs that felt like home, I sent them a photo. No filters, no caption. Just the place I'd worked 10 years to earn. Dad replied 2 days later. Proud of you. Ever thought of putting it in the family trust? Safer that way. Mom called that evening so far out of town. Baby, are you sure it's safe to live alone? No one asked what color I painted the walls. No one asked how it felt to hold the keys. A week later, Mason showed up unannounced. He walked through the house like he was shopping. You could Airbnb the basement, he said, nodding help with the loan stuff. Our loan, he meant. His latest business imported phone chargers with military-grade tech had imploded again 2 nights. After that, Dad sat me down. Sweetheart, he said, we've always been a family that supports each other. It's time you do your part. Sell this place. Help get your brother back on his feet. I didn't speak, just smiled, and in that silence something snapped. It didn't break. Not a loud thing, not glass shattering, just a soft, precise crack like the shift in a bone when it sets in the right direction for the first time. I wasn't going to explain myself again. Not for the loan. Not for the house. Not for the lifetime of being the daughter they counted on, but never truly counted. Let them think I would fold. Let them think I was still playing the part, because the next move was already in motion, and this time the paperwork had my name on every line. I let them think I was crumbling. Truth was, I was clearing the ground. I told them I'd think about it. That's all I said. No protest, no tears, no pointed questions about how many times I'd bailed Mason out before. Just a nod, slow and calm, like someone preparing to surrender. And that's exactly what they expected. I could see it in the way. Dad's shoulders relaxed. How Mom offered to send me casseroles just to help with the transition. Mason gave me a half pat on the back like he was doing me a favor accepting my sacrifice. No one noticed my hand tighten around to the edge of the table, or how I pressed my lips together to keep from laughing. They thought I was agreeing to give up everything I built, and in a way, I was. Just not the way they imagined. That weekend, I called my attorney. I'd found her years ago after Mason tried to use my name as a co-signer for a personal loan without telling me. She was sharp, discreet, and didn't ask unnecessary questions. I liked that about her. I need to move the deed into a single-member LLC. I told her, and I want to do it quietly. No public paper trail, she asked, preferably not one they can follow. It took 3 days. I moved the house, the land and the utilities into the name of Clear and Westcott Holdings LLC, a name close enough to throw off anyone skimming but legally mine in full. I made myself both managing member and registered agent. Then I called a property management company, told them I'd be taking an out-of-state contract and needed someone to maintain the house while some family friends stayed for a while. All utilities were rerouted, mail held, the address reclassified under a trust forwarding system. That Monday, I handed over the keys. You can stay here, I said gently, just until I figure out what to do next. Dad clapped me on the back like I'd finally learned something. Mom looked misty, calling it a full circle moment. Mason didn't say much, just parked his BMW in the driveway like he owned it, and I moved into a small rental 15 minutes away. At least, that's what I told them. The house I chose was modest white siding, little garden out front, 2 bedrooms and creaky floors that reminded me of my college dorm. It came with old blinds and low ceilings and not much light, the kind of place people assume is a step down. But the paperwork, that house was mine too. Purchased, months earlier under a different LLC, a different address, a different forwarding agent. Everything clean, separate, invisible. I even had fake lease documents drawn up just in case they decided to snoop. A week later, I invited Mom over for tea, just to finish the scene. She sat stiffly on my sagging sofa, looking around like she was touring a crime scene. Bit of a downgrade, isn't it? She asked, sipping from the chipped mug I gave her. But it's good you're learning to live within your means. I smiled. Yeah, I'm learning all kinds of things. That night, I lit a candle and sat on my own front steps barefoot, letting the wind carry away the last of what used to hurt. They thought I was giving up. They didn't know I was just getting ready. They walked barefoot on what they thought was a gift. It was a fuse. By the second week, they'd made themselves comfortable. Mom replaced the curtains in the living room, said my taste had always leaned too cold. Dad rearranged the den so the recliner faced the window, just like in their old house. Mason brought in his old gaming chair and set it up in what used to be my home office. He laughed while he did it, said something about reclaiming space. No one asked if I minded. I dropped by once or twice that month, just enough to sell the image. I brought over groceries, some mail they'd forwarded to the house, a six-pack of the craft beer Dad liked. I parked on the street, wore flats, said things like, "I'm managing, don't worry, and it's not forever." They believed every word. Mom started inviting neighbors over for coffee again. At one point, I saw a photo on Facebook, Mason leaning against the front porch, grinning beside a sign that read, "Fresh Start." Claire didn't get tagged. I kept the notifications anyway. There was something oddly satisfying about watching them nest, like watching someone carefully redecorate a hotel room without realizing checkout was already scheduled. The management company handled the paperwork. Quietly, monthly statements were sent to my private business address. I reviewed the tenant agreement again and again, not because I needed to, but because it felt good, concrete legal mine. Some nights I sat at my new kitchen table eating cereal straight from the box laptop open to nothing in particular, listening to the hum of quiet that comes with space no one else thinks they own. I wasn't angry, not anymore. What I felt was sharper, colder, not rage, but readiness, a kind of practiced calm that comes after too many years of being told you were too much or too independent. They thought I was licking my wounds. I was lining up my documents. Then came the invitation. Mason was throwing a party. A small gathering, he said, just family and close friends celebrating a milestone. Apparently, the loan was officially paid off. They had managed to handle it. The house had been a sacrifice, Mom said, but one that brought the family together again. The theme was fresh starts. She texted me, "Wear something light. Baby, it's a celebration of new beginnings." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened the drawer beside me, pulled out the folder labeled Exit Inside, Deed. Copies, tenant notices, time-stamped signatures. I slipped them into a new envelope, clean and white, and sealed it with a piece of tape. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to shout. I just needed to wait until the toasts started. They raised their glasses to a lie. I raised the truth. The backyard looked almost identical to the night I left it. Same folding chairs, same string lights, same polite laughter floating beneath the smell of pulled pork and too sweet sangria. But this time I wasn't standing at the edge of the party with a melting drink. I was seated near the center, between the fake fern and the ice bucket like someone they'd allowed back into the circle. Mason was glowing. He wore a pale blue button-down and the expression of a man being slowly crowned. Mom hovered near him like a stage manager, smoothing his collar, fixing his hair. Dad had on his retired but still important face and stood by the grill like he was earning his keep, sat with a single glass of sparkling water, untouched the condensation slowly soaking into my napkin. I smiled when people passed, nodded when they said, "So proud of your family," said, "Thank you, though no one ever said what for." Near sunset, someone clinked a glass. Dad cleared his throat. "I just want to take a moment to honor what this family has been through," he began. "There were hard choices, but we made them together. Mason, son, you made it. Applause. Light-controlled and Claire," he said, motioning toward me. "Sold her home, her dream to help her brother. That's what family does." More applause. I held my breath for one long beat, then I stood up. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't rise. "Dad's right," I said. "That is what family does." Silence fell fast, faster than I expected. "But what family doesn't do," I continued, "is lie. Manipulate and freeload off the one child who actually stood on her own 2 feet. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. White clean, marked only with today's date. Mason shifted. Mom blinked like I'd slapped her. "I didn't sell my house," I said evenly. "I never did." I opened the envelope and pulled out the deed. Then the tenant agreement. Then the notarized notice. I still own that house. This house. It's held under an LLC, which I created, which I control. You're not guests. You're tenants, asps now, chair scraped back. "And as your landlord," I said, holding up the final page, "I'm giving you formal notice to vacate. 30 days, effective immediately." No yelling, no swearing, no breakdown, just faces draining pale under string lights that suddenly felt a little too warm. Someone muttered, "Is this real?" Someone else whispered, "She planned this." I folded the documents, slipped them back into the envelope, sat down. No applause this time, just the sound of Mason breathing too loud, and Dad clenching his jaw like a man who just realized the will he assumed was inherited no longer applies. Mom looked at me, her lips parted, then shut again. She didn't ask why. She didn't need to because she already knew. They all did. They just hadn't thought I'd be the one to say it out loud with documents, not drama, with a deadline, not a cry. They thought I'd come to celebrate a lie. I came to end it. They thought I was burning the house down. I was just turning off the lights. The days after the party passed in a strange quiet. No dramatic phone calls, no midnight doorstep confrontations, just silence, thick, brittle, uncertain. Then one by one, they began to crack. Mason showed up first, not in person. He sent an email written like a newsletter apology. "Hey sis, look, things got a little heated. Maybe we can meet up, talk this through. It's been a rough year for everyone. I'm willing to move out, early if needed. Just don't make this worse than it has to be." I didn't respond. 3 days later, I received a formal complaint from a private lender. Mason had used a shell company to apply for business loans, names borrowed, co-signatures forged. My name came up during a routine flag on addresses, but I'd separated everything. Every LLC, every signature, every paper trail, untouchable. My lawyer forwarded the inquiry, attached a single line. "They'll come for him next." "You're clean, Mom," called that night. She didn't yell. She cried, "Claire, how did it get this far? Your brother is falling apart. Your father won't leave his room. I don't know what to tell people. They're asking questions." I listened, and then I told her the truth. "Tell them I stopped letting you lie about me." She went quiet after that. No more casseroles. No more group texts. No more. "We're proud of our Claire and Christmas cards." I never got. I drove by the house once a week before the notice expired. Dad was on the porch. Head in hands, Mason's car was gone. A small moving truck was parked halfway up the drive, back doors open. It was raining lightly. No one looked up. I kept driving. I wasn't angry anymore. What I felt was peace, cool and clean, like the air after a long storm. 6 months later, I stood in my new kitchen. The ocean beyond the glass was quiet, and the salt air rolled in with the sound of gulls instead of voices. The house wasn't big, but it was mine. Every window, every tile, every silence. It wasn't the kind of place you buy to impress people. It was the kind you keep to be left alone. I started a consulting firm. Quietly built it slow. Hired women like me. Quiet, capable, overlooked. The kind people assume will stay grateful forever. One of them called me a mentor. I changed the subject. Somewhere in that time, an article came out, "Women in Finance Shaping Legacy Through Law." My name was printed in clean serif letters beside a photo. I didn't know they'd taken me mid-laugh hair down, glass of wine in hand. A few days later, Mom sent a message. "We didn't know you'd done so well. The house in the article, is that yours?" No apology. Just surprised that I was never who they thought. I deleted the message. Then I turned off my phone. The thing about being underestimated your whole life is that when you finally rise, they can't follow. They're too busy looking for the girl who stayed behind. But she doesn't live here anymore. I didn't come back for revenge. I didn't come back to be forgiven. I came back so they could never rewrite me out again.